Good morning, everyone. My name is Janelle Molony. I am an author and historian, and today I have an incredible privilege of inviting and interviewing one of the descendants who was part of my Emigrant Tales of the Platte River Raids book. This woman has an incredible legacy in her family. The ancestor that she is related to was held in captivity after the Platte River Raids for several months while her husband was rallying the Union Army to figure out how to find her, to rescue her. And our families kind of had a little brief encounter, or our wagon trains had a brief encounter in 1864, so we have this really cool connection. Well, I'm really excited to introduce to you Barbara Romine. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just so excited to be here right now because it kind of brings everything to light for me, whereas before it was just fact this, and now it's like it's right here and it's real. Mm-hmm. People, it's just amazing.
I could tell people, but I want to hear from you. What is your connection to, we'll start with the Platte River Raids of 1864. How are you, or how is your family involved in that?
Josiah and Fanny Kelly are my third great grand aunt and uncle on my dad's side, and two of people that I have been involved with finding more about over the years. And with your help, it's really brought everything to light for me.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what do you mean by help? Do you mean how I took Fanny's diary or her memoir and then put it into context so you could see what else was going on or how serious the situation was? What do you mean?
Well, I know that it was serious, but bringing it, like you said, into context, and it was like making it so much more real than just reading it. It was like I was there with them through your book. It was amazing.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I found that was missing when I originally read Fanny's memoir was, what was her husband doing the whole time? She has a section after she's kidnapped where she kind of explains, well, he went and got help, but that's kind of where it ends. But through my research with the Union Army records, I was able to track his movements in what expeditions he joined and how hard he constantly searched for his wife. And I was really moved by that. And he was dead serious to find her and save her no matter what the cost. So I found that to be interesting because I thought that piece of the story had not been well developed in the past. And I'm really happy that I could put Josiah right up on the same platform as Fanny, as well as being a bad A pioneer immigrant who did whatever he needed to do to survive.
Well, Josiah was, I believe he was like 10 years older than my Aunt Fanny. In my take on it, obviously, because I've never spoken to them, is that he cared very, very much for her. And he was not going to leave any stone unturned until he found her or found what happened to her. I know that he, like you said, did so many different things to try and get her back, even giving horses to the Indians to get them to bring her back. And then they ended up bringing back another white woman with her kids. Maybe they thought it was Fanny, maybe they didn't, but they brought back the wrong white woman with her children. So he still had no answer to where Fanny was, or even if she was still alive.
Right. Well, I'm sure that other family actually really appreciated his efforts. Oh boy. Yeah. Well, let's go back in time a little bit so we know how they even ended up in this situation. Can you tell me a little bit about their past in Kansas? And this is during the Bleeding Kansas period. So Kansas is a very heated, contested area during the Civil War times. And what are they doing getting together? What's their beginning?
Well, Fanny came from, as you know, she was born in Canada. She came to the United States with her dad and her mom and her siblings, and her father passed away. So they stayed in Kansas, and this is where she met Josiah after he returned from the war. And they got married, and his health was not the greatest, as mine is not right now. And so they decided to go on this wagon train out west. So they took all the cows and the calves and all the dry goods and everything that they would need to open up a store, and they set out for out west. They had a friend, I believe his name was Mr. Wakefield. He went with them, and then another man and his son. They were...
Was that Andy and Franklin?
Yes. They went with them, and after a while, they ended up having other immigrant wagon trains joining them. I believe the Larimers were one of them, in addition to, I don't know how many other ended up being with them. So because of his health, they decided that's what they wanted to do. And then that fateful day happened and changed everything.
I learned recently that maybe William Larimer and Josiah Kelly had actually served in the same regiment, the 5th Kansas Cavalry. And I don't know the conditions of each one's release or dismissal, because they both came out being sick or injured. So I think there was some kind of built-in bond between them, but they weren't just locals who knew each other in passing, but these men trusted each other.
I don't know all of those facts. I do know that Josiah was in the Army, and he did come out and he did have health issues. But when they left Kansas, the Larimers weren't with them.
Right, not initially.
They were in different trains. So I don't know. I haven't gotten that far. I don't have those facts to say that is or is not the situation.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that they were filling their wagons with things for mercantile, and do you know where they were going?
It was apparently they were heading for Idaho.
Idaho or Idaho Territory, which was multiple states.
Exactly, the multiple states, because It was so confusing on how all the states were back then and the territories, and it's hard sometimes to follow in the direction that they're talking about, because they ended up in Wyoming and everything else.
In 1864, in July, all that we know of Wyoming right now was in Idaho Territory, except for a little piece on the southwest corner that includes Fort Bridger. That was in Utah Territory at that time. So that's what we're talking about.
Right.
So can you tell me how Fanny Kelly ended up becoming a captive of Northern Plains Indians? What was that?
How did she become a captive? The wagon train was attacked. Apparently, the Indians came and they served them dinner, etc. And then they turned on them and they started ransacking all the wagons. They, were killing people. Josiah was off with another gentleman, supposedly gathering wood or taking care of the horses. I'm not quite sure on exactly how that was, but the Indians ended up pulling Fanny out of her wagon, in which they almost broke her arm doing so. And they put her and Mary on the back of a horse, when it came to that other lady, Mrs. Larimer, my take on what my aunt wrote was that they were going to eliminate her, and she talked them out of it. So they put her and her son, I believe his name was Frank, on another horse, and they took them as captive. After the first night, I believe it was, Mrs. Larimer and her son were able to escape, where Fanny was not. Fanny had taken Mary and slid her off the back of a horse, the horse they were on. And there was an Indian, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around here. There was an Indian that gave Fanny some books. And Fanny was dropping these pages as they were going through the trails after they were put on the horses. And she slid Mary off the back end and told Mary to follow the pages back, and hopefully she'll find another wagon train they will take care of her. Unfortunately, as we all know, that's not what happened to her. But there's a lot of things that always ran through my mind with this paper trail thing. Because Fanny was held captive for 5 or 6 months. So she's throwing these papers out on this trail at first. So you don't know what happened to them. I mean, the wind could have blown them away. The rain could have beat them up and washed them down a riverbank or something like that.
How many pages did she even have at her disposal?
Exactly. How many pages? And did Josiah ever see any of those pages when he went looking for her?
I actually don't know.
I don't either. So those are some of the crazy things that, have always crossed my mind.
Before I ask about Mary, you bring up, did the dude realize the clues the lady left behind? And I think about men today and the clues that we leave for them for chores that need to be done, or look, our hair got redone, and we leave clues, and they don't register all the time. And I do wonder if these books that she's pulling pages out of, did he even know what book she was reading at that time? And even if he knew, if he saw a random page out of a book, would he be able to recognize and be like, that was the book that my wife was reading?
I think he would have realized that it was her. I really feel he would have. Like I said, he was quite a bit older than her, but I think they had this really, really strong bond between the two of them, and he would have known that those were her books. I mean, after all, he helped pack the wagon.
True. Or maybe,
surely.
What if they were books for the mercantile? So they were books they were going to be selling.
Oh, that could be too.
I don't know. So going back to Mary, you kept bringing up this person's name, but I haven't brought them up. So let's go ahead and answer the question now. Who's Mary?
Mary is, she is basically Fanny's niece. It is her sister's daughter that she adopted and took out west with her. I am still doing some research on that situation as to why her sister would allow Fanny to adopt her. The only thing that I am thinking of is that her husband passed away. She had too many kids. She couldn't take care of them all. I do know that after her sister's husband died, 3 years later, she remarried. So it's hard to say. I can only speculate on what may have happened with that situation.
Yeah. I saw a census in the future, and it only showed one of the 4 kids that she had. So I don't know if she had to offload multiples to relatives or church friends or neighbors. I don't know. That was tough times.
It was very tough times, and I'm still researching that.
Before we move on, what happened to Mary? Did she make it after she was slipped off the horse?
Unfortunately, Mary did not make it. She followed the paper trail back. And she was standing, the next morning she was standing on a hill, I guess you could call it. And she saw some soldiers coming by, and she was waving her hands and trying to get their attention. But they didn't come near her because they thought that, it was strange that here's this young little girl out on the prairie by herself. And then they saw the Indians, and they thought that they were using her as bait. So they didn't go near her. I believe it was the next morning, a wagon train came through, and they saw her body, and it was pretty much mutilated from one of the animals gnawing on her leg.
What happened to her?
She had been shot with arrows, tomahawked, and scalped. And then they took her scalp and her scarf with them as trophies. I'm sorry, that's really hard for me to talk about sometimes.
Yeah, understandably. And the soldiers were right there. She could have been saved. Right there. She could have been saved.
Yes, she could have been saved.
And we know now where she is, where her body lies at rest. And we're going to do what we can to put some flowers on it.
I would so appreciate that. Mm-hmm. I would so appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't know what all was going through Fanny's mind during her captivity. I know that she always wondered about what happened to Josiah, if Mary made it back or not. But I don't think she wanted to believe that she had not made it until she saw her scalp and Mary's scarf hanging from an Indian's saddle. And then she knew the fate that became of Mary.
Well, from what I understand, her captors, and I use that as a general term because she was kind of passed around to different bands as she was found useful or however as a slave. But they had told her multiple times, everyone died and there was no one to escape to. No one's going to save her. Don't even bother. But I don't think she believed that.
No, I don't believe that she did either.
There's a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that says, women never know how strong they are until they're put in hot water. Oh, women are like tea bags. They never know how strong they are until they're put in hot water. Something like that. And I can imagine getting to a place in her mind that even if part of her believed that everyone was dead, she wasn't going to join them yet.
She was definitely going to make it. She had a very strong will to survive. Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that woulda, coulda, shoulda broke Fanny Kelly while in captivity?
Other wives of the chief treated her very badly.
Oh, yeah. The scraps left over of the dogs, even.
Yes. They,
I wonder if it's because she was pretty. There's an element to that. I mean, she was pretty.
I think they were more jealous of her because she wasn't being that mistreated by the chiefs themselves. I think they were jealous, definitely jealous.
Right away, there was a war chief who put a bow to her heart and was about to kill her for some kind of offense. I forget what it was, but the Blackfoot.
What was that about? I can't remember that.
She did something to offend someone.
Oh, the pipe.
Oh,
she
pipe.
lost the peace pipe. That they got very, very angry with her because she was carrying so much on the back of her horse, dragging it along and carrying his things, and she threw the pipe away because it was aggravating her. Oh, they were so furious with her because she threw that pipe away.
I do remember there was an instance where later on, as more military on Sioux skirmishes are happening, that the tribe or the band who had her said, you know what, your people have killed more of our people, so now we're going to burn you on a stake. It's not personal. It's just, we have to even the score. So get ready to die. There was that.
How can that not be personal?
My goodness. What do you think helped increase her chance of survival?
Well, it's hard because, I've never really spoken to her because obviously reasons, okay?
Really?
All of this is just my take on all of this stuff. Plus stories from family that I've heard or read about that my family has written about her. So it's hard to say how she was feeling. It's hard to say what she felt she had to do to survive this incident or that incident, or how she even, I don't know how she did it, to be honest with you. I don't think I could have.
There are some historians that have written a few stories about your family and have made or drawn some conclusions similar to what you're saying can't really be drawn. And I want to point that out. As a living family descendant with access to material that those researchers and historians have not seen, access to the oral histories that have been passed down that those folks have not seen, you are saying it's impossible to draw those conclusions. Please stop. Please don't. Just, I don't know is an acceptable answer sometimes.
Absolutely. Unless you have all the facts, how can you form an opinion about anyone? I do know that your research, since I've known you, since you reach out to me, you're very thorough. And you don't put down anything in words unless you have something to back it up with. Or
I will say, I'm not sure, it might be this or it might be that, and I leave it and I will not draw the line because I don't know. I can only use conjecture, and I admit to that. I admit when I don't know.
Well, there's nothing wrong with not knowing, like you said.
What was it like for you to see the behind the scenes? Because I allowed 35 living descendants out of the 70 wagon trains that are featured in the book Emigrant Tales. I was only able to talk to 35 descendants. Some folks were not willing to talk to me. I would reach out through various venues and they would be like, I don't know who you are, and I'm not giving you my family history, and I'm not sharing personal stuff with you, so goodbye. Or maybe it was, I don't know the answer. I've never heard of this, and I'm the one that knows or has the theory, and they don't know, and they have nothing to contribute. So I had a lot of that. But out of 70, 35, so more than half, were able to see my works in progress. And I'll admit, they were garbage and not edited and not clean and all disorganized. And you could see how the pieces were falling together. And you had authority to tell me very clearly, that's spot on, or no, I have this letter from, like the letters from resin that you provided, or I have this letter that actually will provide clarity or change the date of when these things happened. And what was that like for you to be behind the scenes?
I believe I did do that with you too. There were many things that were written down that I emailed you. This is not correct. This is it. This is the way. Like spelling of names, like dates. like letters. I mean, I don't even know if you had all of the letters, because Josiah also wrote to his other brother, William Harrison. He wrote to him. Even Fanny wrote to Resin after she was saved.
Unfiltered too. This is not the stuff that got documented at Washington D.C. Not in her memoir. These are unfiltered details where we can get some of the real truth and not the. I think there was filtering done in her book. I think there was some kind of censoring of making this content presentable and saleable. Whereas in the letters, it is what it is.
The letters were passed down from family. I have some relatives that wrote. They didn't. I don't want to say they wrote a book. Okay, they put together a book. It was never published. It was strictly for family only, which I did share with you some of it, like the one from Fanny to Resin. And
I think I saw that one.
Did you? Okay. So all the facts in that book, those letters, even though they were typed out because it was put in a book form for all of us in the family, it was the original letter. Where the actual original letter is, I don't know.
Well, it's been 160 years. Stuff goes missing.
Well, I would imagine that more than likely it probably got so yellowed and faded, it just faded away, to be honest with you.
So that is another great point. When we have these precious finds in our family, the letters and the pictures and such, type them out, make a copy. If you copy it onto regular paper, that actual regular paper now will last longer than the old paper. Scan it so you can reprint and distribute it to your family, because if that one person who holds it all passes away, no one knows where that file is, or they don't search well enough, or it's on the computer and they can't get to it, then when there's someone else who knows, that's really important. And your family has done a great job of distributing a lot. I want to ask you now, who are you distributing to? How do we make sure that what you've done, and you've done an incredible job, not just preserving, but distributing that information, but who's next in line? Who are you raising up to make sure they know that these papers are not just stuff, that don't throw it away? This is real U.S. history here in the family.
Well, you have to remember, back when my family made this book, there were no computers, there were no cell phones, etc., etc. Nowadays, all I have to do is take screenshots of paperwork, scan paperwork into my computer. Everything is on paper. Everything is in my computer. It's even on my cell phone. Because when I get out talking about them, I like to show them everything.
Yeah.
I get so excited, and sometimes I don't know when to be quiet. So everything is saved. My children, my son and my daughters know where everything is.
Let's go back to Fanny's experience. There was a particular individual that she had several interactions with. I don't believe they were continuous interactions, but multiple repeated interactions with. And his name was John Grass, or I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Mato Watakpe, or his warrior name was Charging Bear. And he was the Subchief of the Sahasapa Blackfoot Sioux from the Dakotas, as it was back then, the Dakotas. And he was part of the kidnapping. But I feel like if we just stop there, people get the wrong impression of who he was and his character and how he was raised to treat people. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more about that.
More about John Grass.
Yeah.
His father, Bill, was the head chief.
Mm-hmm.
And they both played a big part of Fanny's return from captivity. she wrote in her book that she called Fanny a savage gentleman, so to speak.
So basically,
most
gentleman.
likely because of his upbringing.
Mm-hmm. Even though John was part of the kidnapping, I don't know that he necessarily condoned it. I don't think he agreed with the way she was being treated.
As far as John Grass, he was part of the initial capture, but I don't feel like you that he condoned it. I don't think he realized what they were going to or planning on doing when they went to the wagon train, other than, maybe stealing all their stuff and their horses and their cattle, etc.
Yeah, the plan kind of went awry.
I think it did too. And I think he regretted everything because he seemed to be more of a protector towards Fanny. There was kind of a bond there.
Yes, and he was making amends to her multiple times, although being a subchief, he
had to be careful.
Right, because he doesn't have authority to truly step in. But I do think when the arrow was aimed at her heart, I don't remember the exact details, but I think he grabbed the bow or he knocked it out of the hand or said stop or something, and he said no to not kill her. And I don't know if he knew that Mary was dead. I don't know if he knew what had been done since they had left Little Box Elder Creek, but he knew that she didn't need to die.
She would write letters and ask that he deliver them to the fort when he went there. And I'm a little confused on that part because they weren't getting taken there. And then the very last letter that she wrote, he ended up taking it to the fort. I believe it was Fort Sully. And they arranged for her release.
Mm-hmm. I think they weren't getting through because he used a messenger.
Well, the messenger burned them.
Oh my. So then when he personally delivered it, so that's him saying, you know what, this has got to be done right. But before that letter interaction happened, she was still in captivity, and Chief Bill Grass was being held accountable for her rescue. Chief Bill and his son John partnered, found her, and that John was able to confirm this is the woman that the Union Army is looking for. I know this is the one they want. And so they brought with them 16 horses, and initially they offered the leader of that band, they said, we're going to give you 8 horses for that woman. We want that woman. And then that guy was like, no, thanks, I like her. We're going to keep her. And then they said, okay, Chief Bill said, we're going to give you all 16 horses. Give us that woman. And they're like, nah, pass. I think they ran it up the chain and like, no, I think we're good. And then Chief Bill said, okay, last deal. You give me that woman or what? Do you remember what he said?
I do not.
I think he said, you give me that woman today or...
Oh, they start a war.
We bury all of you today.
Yeah.
And I think that is an incredible threat because it was just, to my knowledge, just Chief Bill Grass and his subchief, his son, John Grass, the 2 dudes versus the entire band. And for some reason, the entire band was like, no, we don't want to fight you. So what was the reputation? These guys had a reputation, and from what I understand, the Blackfoot Sioux were some of the more violent, some of the no quarter kind of warriors. And when Chief Bill went to fight the Shoshone near Fort Bridger that summer, they left a path of destruction. And out of his 75 warriors that he brought with him, all 75 came back alive, adorned with the scalps of the Shoshone. And for 3 weeks after that encounter, the Shoshone who survived were still in hiding. So these men make the others shake in their boots. So Chief Bill and his son John, who knew this woman, and she probably, if she knew that they were there, she was like, this is it, they're going to save me. You know, you can feel that anticipation. But they got her. They got her. And then we're able to try and figure out, okay, now what do we do? You know, where do we take you? What do we do? And then those letters started coming out. And from what I understand, John couldn't read the letters, but she was able to give the military important information to protect them and arrange her escape or her safe passage back to the fort.
Right. She kind of wrote the letters in between the lines of telling them of a raid that they were planning on doing on the fort.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So she was able to put all of this message in between these lines because he couldn't read it. Mm-hmm. He didn't know what she was saying. She would put, I think she was putting in enough that he could tell by what a little bit of what she was saying is what she wanted him to hear. But the rest for the fort was in between, and they got it. They had something about, the white flag thing that they always used to fly for, peace, I come in peace type thing. They were a little leery when she came with the white flag, but they let her in, and it goes from there. But yet when she got there, they said she was very thinly dressed and almost frozen. So she spent many, many months in the hospital at the fort recuperating before she even saw Josiah.
And then years later, she went to Washington, D.C. I believe it was with President Ulysses S. Grant at that point, and she was advocating that she receive restitution for her injuries and losses, and various tribal headmen or principal chiefs were called to that meeting who were involved, or their people were involved, and they were being held accountable to pay out of their annuums to fulfill that restitution request. But I remember there was something in there that maybe it was John Grass's wife recorded that when she saw these men that she recognized that had mistreated her, she was visibly upset, which makes sense. And then she saw at that point a chief, John Grass, and she said, my friend, there's something there that years later she saw the man who, though he knew exactly what she'd been through, though he couldn't have stopped it by himself, he still did whatever he could do to make it right. And he was there at that meeting also to make amends too for his people. And that is just so full circle.
The lady that you're talking about was John's wife.
That would be Mary Grass.
Right. But getting back just a little bit to Fanny at the fort, after she and Josiah were reunited, they went back to Kansas. They didn't stay out west. They went back to Kansas, and they ended up opening up a hotel because they were building the railroad. The railroad was coming through. And they had such unrest still with the Indians out there. They brought the army in to protect the town and the people in it. Well, when they came, they brought cholera with them. So Josiah ended up getting cholera, and he died.
Yeah, days before the baby was born, or days after the baby?
Nope, just before. She ended up having to leave Geneva, Kansas, because of the cholera, and she went to another town. I can't think of it off my top of my head. But they didn't want her there either. They put her in a house outside of town because they were afraid that she would bring them the cholera.
Makes sense.
And that's when she had her son. And then it's after that she went to, I believe she went back out west to stay with the Larimers for a time. And then something happened, which I'm not going to get into, but something happened and she ended up leaving. And that's when President Grant invited her to Washington. Yes. She made a list of everything that she had lost. And the Indians insisted that they take the money from their allotment to pay her back for what they had taken from her and destroyed. But when she saw John, she remembered him, he remembered her, and it was good. It was a good thing. It was a good meeting. You just don't know where you come from until you start digging, and then the things that you see and hear.
Thank you for keeping that story alive and relevant, and also putting it out there accurately, not allowing other people to tell it for you, but asserting yourself and saying, excuse me, I'm an actual relative, I'm an actual descendant, and I'd like to set the record straight. And I think I commend you for that, because that's really important. And I think historians need to take a note and say, if we're going to write about this person, we should probably see if there's a living descendant who might know maybe more than we do.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining me to talk through that experience, to keep Fanny's story relevant, and now to invite others to take a look back into their own family history. I am so grateful that you felt comfortable, felt like you could trust me to put that story into context and to share it with the world, and to share in the pride, because now the book Emigrant Tales of the Platte River Raids back here, it's winning awards just left and right. And that is a testament to how important these stories really are, and how our story of just my family relative is actually a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger when we put it in context. Our family history is actually U.S. history. It is world history. And I think this book does a great job of making that point very clear. So again, thank you for coming alongside me, Barbara.
Oh, I'm so happy that this all happened to begin with. I have to tell you, I have your book, physical copy. I have it on my iPad. I have a video, not a video, but an e-reader, so that when I'm driving, I can listen to that. I just constantly am picking up this book and reading through it, because it just brings back a part, like you said, a part of me that it's just an amazing thing to have, to give to your family in the future, your grown kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids. It's very important to me that they all know where their roots come from. But thank you so much for allowing this video or this talk. I'm just ecstatic over this whole book thing. It just amazes me. The work that you've put into this is phenomenal. And I do so appreciate you making sure that everything was correct.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and watching this interview today. I look forward to providing even more great stories for you in the future. Bye, everyone.
Bye.